So hello, my name is Rachel Davison Humphreys, and this is Civic Conversations, a digital town hall from the Bill of Rights Institute. I am over the moon that we are joined today by State Senator Shevrin D from Florida. And so we're going to be having a really kind of dynamic conversation today. Senator Jones has so much to share about civic conversations, civic life, the life of a legislator, especially for you Floridian teachers. So to start off, hello, Senator. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Senator Jones, for those of you that don't know, he grew up in Carroll City, Florida. And while there, I love that you speak to your parents who instill in you and your brothers the value of education, faith, and service to the community. I expect that value of education is what brought Senator Jones to teaching AP chemistry in Broward County at Florida Atlantic University High School. And then you went on to found LEAD Nation, one of South Florida's top nonprofit organizations committed to youth leadership development and social entrepreneurship training. And now you're actually still continuing your education. I don't know how you find the time to do everything, because when I look at the list of committees you are on, the number of committees, you're getting a PhD, you talk about the fact that you have a beautiful big family that you love to spend time with. We can get to that like life balance in the future. I have some questions, but so you are pursuing your PhD in educational leadership at Florida Atlantic University. So your firsthand look at the iniquities in education and society at large propelled you to enter public service. Starting in 2012, you were elected to the Florida House of Representatives, championing meaningful bipartisan legislation. That's something we're going to want to talk about, including 2 consecutive bills to secure dignity for incarcerated women, statewide expansion of clean syringe exchange programs, and ensuring transparency and accountability via police body cameras. Very necessary. Today, you're proudly serve in the 35th Senate District, which includes portions of Broward and Miami-Dade counties, and you're the first LGBT state senator in Florida's history. You serve on, you're vice chair of the Education Committee, the Appropriations Subcommittee on Health and Human Services, the Finance and Tax Committee, the Health Policy Committee, the Transportation Committee, the Joint Administrative Procedures Committee, and you're a very active member of Alpha Phi Alpha, which is one of my favorite civil society institutions that supports Black men.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I don't understand how you have time to enjoy reading, running, and spending time with your family, but it seems like that you lead a very full, active civic life, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We have a couple of questions that we researched you, and we reached out to our Florida teacher community, and we want to kind of start with your history and your role, and then we'll move on to how you came to your ideas about bipartisanship and its importance, especially in Florida, which has a lot of tension between different communities. And then we'll look at just kind of civic friendship and public service for students, specifically looking at how we teach these really hard topics. As an educator and a legislator, you have some great insight into that calling, and I'd love to get there by the end of our conversation.
I love
so. Welcome all of you teachers on the internet live and when we publish this on YouTube. So let's just start, Senator. How did you, a former teacher, went to your fantastic HBCU to Florida A&M, come into teaching? How did that happen?
So first, again, thank you for having me on. I'm really happy to be on this with you today. So my first plan wasn't to go be a teacher. My first plan was to go to med school. I had majored in biochemistry, molecular biology at Florida A&M, had got accepted into two different med schools, took a year of deferment off, and by the time I got home, my dad did not want me at home not doing anything, so he strongly encouraged
gentle,
strong encouragement. He asked me to consider doing something with my time, whether it was going to AmeriCorps, because I did apply for Teach for America. I did not get into Teach for America. So then I said, you know what? Well, let me just apply to go be a teacher. So I wanted to go be a teacher. And I said, well, I'll do this for a year while I wait. So I started teaching AP Bio. But then 1 year turned into 9 years because I really started enjoying my time with.
They get their hooks in you. Those teenagers, they get you.
Yeah. They hooked me in. And I just couldn't see them. I couldn't see them moving because I started teaching AP Bio, and then they moved me to AP Chemistry, and my students were moving from 10th to 11th grade. And I was like, oh, I want to see them continue to grow. So I got stuck teaching, but it was a good stuff.
Of course. And so then you obviously loved your time with the students. You wouldn't have spent 9 years in the classroom. That's like I was also 9 years in the classroom before I transitioned out. And it's just such a full life to be a part of their lives, to go to the games with them and to like see them in your community. What was the how did you go from being a teacher then to being in the House of Representatives for the state of Florida? What was your calling there? How did that happen?
So I'll never forget, one year I was teaching level 1 students, and those are some of your most educationally challenged students who are statistically known to read not above the 6th or 7th grade level. And the rules kept changing. Every year we would come back, the rules were changing. The only thing I can remember, although I was teaching AP, this one year that I taught these level 1 students, I said that these are the students who are falling between the cracks with these different rules changes. So I asked the principal, who keep changing the rules? And he said, the politicians do. And so I was so upset. I said, you know what? I'm gonna run for office. And I literally ran for office and said to myself, that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to run for office. And I ran for county commission first. That wasn't what I was supposed to do. So I lost that seat. But then someone told me you should run for state rep. I said, I just lost a county seat. There's no way I'm about to win a state seat. But I lost, I ran, I won, and I served in the House of Reps for for 8 years.
Yeah, and then thus your role as a legislator came to be, right?
Yes.
And so let's talk about that transition, because I know from hanging out at the councils and everything else with history and civics teachers, I actually taught STEM when I taught middle school, but then I taught more of the humanities when I taught high school, and so I know that there is a little bit of a difference, but the love of the students and the way that you think about the importance of your role is the same. So let's talk a little bit about like that transition from teacher to legislator. How did your role as a teacher make you a better legislator? I know there are lots of teachers who are like, if I was in charge, things would be different. Well, now you're vice chair of the Committee on Education. So talk about that transition and talk about kind of how your own experience informs how you govern as a legislator.
Well, that's good. Well, because I wasn't an attorney. I wasn't very clear on the process of how to file a bill and all this other stuff. So, I was politically astute, but I just wasn't in the process that much, especially within state government. I was more of an advocate out on the grounds. And so I think it was a good fit because I was more in line of what people wanted and what people were asking for. And so I promised myself in my freshman year that when I became a state legislator, that I would represent the people the way that I wanted to be represented. And that's what I did. I got into the legislature, and that was the only thing that was on my mind. It wasn't the politics. It wasn't what did the Democrats want. It wasn't why the Republicans didn't want to do what I was proposing. It was more of, can I build the relationships to be able to do the work that I can bring success home to my district, to let them know that, what, he truly is working on our behalf. He's listening to us. He's working with us. And so it was me going from the classroom, being a reader. And I'm an avid reader, especially coming from the science background and reading everything. And I just used it to my advantage to be able to put forth good policy that made sense, that could create the bipartisanship that we needed, because I know what type of environment I was in. So I was strong, I was clear on that. And so I was just intentional about how I moved in the legislature.
Can you talk more about that? Talk about that bipartisanship. So you went in knowing, and how did you come to this knowledge? What did you know about bipartisanship and your need to talk about across the aisle? And then what were some of the things that you learned that maybe apply to all of us when it comes to communicating across differences?
So I realized that I didn't do party well. I know, but I did do politics well. I did people very well, right? Because it was clear to me that me doing politics just wouldn't have it didn't get me anywhere. Of course, you have to play your politics sometime, in from time to time, but you can't let it overshadow the real work that really truly needs to get done. And so, I figure if I can win over the people based who are in Tallahassee based off of my relationships, then I can get real work done. So I started doing what I did while I was home. I love going out to dinners and happy hours with friends, and I joined all these young professional groups, and they were big on networking. So I just changed. What I did was I went to Tallahassee and I turned it into a huge networking ordeal, to where I would go to the dinners with my Republican colleagues, go to breakfast and all these things. And it took the load off just a tad bit when I go to their office and say, hey, listen, I know we went to dinner last week, but let me tell you about something that's truly important to me. And I want to know if I can have your support on it. And it never failed. I always left Tallahassee with some wins. I didn't win all the time, but I was able to make some good wins. I'll give you one example. Police body cameras. Police body cameras was something that was extremely controversial at that time. It was after the death of Trayvon Martin, and I was speaking about police violence against Black men, and speaking to them about that, to my colleagues. They didn't understand why I wanted police to have body cameras. So what I did was I said, well, let me get some police officers to talk about why they are too in favor of it, because the police were like, well, listen, if we can get body cameras, then that put us in a predicament to where it's not just us holding us accountable, it's on video. So now I can share, what I did right, when no one can say I did something wrong. And then the community, of course, they thought they benefited from it. So I looked at it from both ends, presented that to my colleagues, and I never forget when I saw that board light up, to walk those halls and to lobby 120 members to talk about why it was important to my community, and the benefit on both sides. It was something that I will never forget. I always use that as a reference point.
That's so powerful. That's such a testimony to, I love those stories, especially of legislators who were like the one vote or the one person who had this bill and was really able to make a positive impact towards liberty and justice in our society. That's like the greatest heights of legislation. And I'm so grateful that you did that for all Floridians. And it also sounds like, so one of the things that I hear in what you're talking about is, so at BRI, we do a lot with what we call the My Impact Challenge, which is a way of looking at service learning that says service to your community kind of has 3 pillars. Mm-hmm. And you can attack problems in different ways. You can find government solutions, you can find like civil society nonprofit solutions, and you can find entrepreneurial solutions. And all 3 of those kinds of solutions are important in a community. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you really take that on. Can you talk a little bit about some of your nonprofit work, like, because you're such a community activist, and how that ties into the work you do legislatively?
Well, nonprofit work is nothing but is really providing a social service to community in a specific area, and it had always been working with Lead Nation. It was working with young Black men and young men and young girls, because I knew that there was a disconnect with what kids were getting in the community and what they were not getting in the community. And so I was trying to figure out, how can we merge the 2 worlds together to where these students who desire to be in leadership, who want to know more, who want to do more within the community, what if you can create a world where they can create community impact on their own? And so that's why I created Lead Nation, to allowing young people to be the voices to create the community projects, present those community projects, raise the dollars to be able to support their community project, and being able to transition that to the legislature. Because the same way, it's the engagement of the community, although it's in a larger capacity. I'm big on, and here's the teacher in me, I'm big on the social service, I'm big on the education, and how can you bring things back down to the level of the people so they can understand that you truly are working for them. For instance, our our office is big on doing what's called a bill writing workshop. I think it's important that people understand that my voice is very important as you as my representative. If I can give you an idea and I can take that idea to Tallahassee, well, this is how bills are created. So we're starting this whole thing called We the People University, where people can apply for the class. They can join the class, and there's just a series of different classes. That's the social service and the education aspect. So I've merged all the worlds together to be able to work on behalf of the people so they can be a part of the process.
That's so amazing. I'm very excited to learn more about the We the People University project that's coming out of your office. Again, the Bill of Rights Institute is very big on civic engagement in this broad sense. Yes. We work with voter initiatives and all those sorts of things, but that's fascinating. So what I hear you saying is that the work that you were doing in service and nonprofits had a direct tie because of that kind of sense of community building. It was about how do I generate a community around my idea and then use the community to uplift it, because it's really hard to do things as a single agent.
But the crazy thing about it is that is the benefit of being in office, because you have this platform, but so many elected officials believe that the platform is for them to stand up on. And it's just not. The platform is there for you to bring other people on to be a part of this conversation, right? Or to be a part of this movement or whatever you're trying to do. Because as long as you're looking down on people, no one wants to follow anybody who's looking down on them. People like someone who's among them, like people who are working alongside them. I think it's so important. You are given that platform to bring people up and engage them in that capacity. That's what I believe.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. It sounds like, just from reading your bio, that actually you have a long history of that kind of work, right? So you were very interested in leadership really early on. I don't know about high school, but I saw in your undergrad years and right afterwards, you've been part of a lot of different leadership initiatives. What would be kind of your interest in, or what would be your advice for those young people who are interested in kind of looking to you as a role model of someone who was able to take their interest in leadership and really make those steps to get to some pretty high heights? What would you say to them?
That if you trust the people that you're leading, they will be the ones to take you every step by step. You don't have to manipulate the process. Because if you manipulate your way to the top, you're gonna have to manipulate your way to stay there. And so if you allow people to move you along, then they will continue to move you in that direction. When the people don't want you anymore, they will unelect you or they won't send you there, right? And so that would be my advice to people. Trust, do what you're doing, be intentional about what you're doing, and do it with a pure heart. Don't manipulate people to move you there.
I love that. So we're getting some questions from our audience, but there's one more thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that was this idea of like the hard history. You are a man who does not shy away from difficult conversations in the community. You're not a man who shies away from difficult conversations with your colleagues who are on the other side. And I was wondering if you could kind of tell us your thoughts about how you approach that. There are a lot of people who don't feel comfortable, who don't feel like their voice will be heard if they engage with the other side. Do you have any suggestions, advice in these times for how we can overcome that hurdle, that barrier, which is a very real and important thing for people to recognize?
So we're in this predicament that we're in right now because of the lack of conversation. We're not talking to each other enough. Everyone is dancing around the issues. No one wants to have a direct conversation about what the real problem is. The only way we're going to be able to get out of what we're in right now is we're going to have to be honest with each other and call that out for what it is, or call it what it is. And so my direct advice to anyone who believes that is to be upfront, to be direct with people, and it's how you say it also, right? People will respect you based off of your tone of the situation, right? You just can't think that, oh, well, my thing is I'm going to say what I want to say with the intent to get my point across and not the intention to actually listen hear what the other side have to say. And I tell people all the time, if your goal is to win the argument, then therefore we don't need to talk about it. But if the goal is to learn and we learn from each other, then that's the way that we continue to work with each other to get to the expected end that we desire to get to. So my advice would be to give advice, but also be willing to take it, but listen with the expectation to not respond, but to understand.
Absolutely. And there's that teacher in you. I can see it. It was right there.
Reiteration.
I see it. And so we have a couple of questions coming in from the teachers. LaShonda West is very interested in equity in both legislature, but also education. Did you tell us about the work you're doing there and how, again, you're approaching the equity conversation in a kind of tense environment? Because the equity conversation has a lot of tension for good reasons. There are people who are very passionate about their needs being met. And so the equity conversation can be very contentious. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you approach that, both as a legislator and also maybe as an educator? How could people approach that?
Absolutely. First thing, I think we have to understand that equity is not equality, right? And I think that's where we're getting these things mixed up at. And so in order to have the equity conversation, we have to have it in a very real way to make sure that it's not one-sided. Oftentimes, the reason why we are having the equity battle that we have is because the conversation is so often one-sided. Because it's the person or the people with the most power are the ones who are making decisions, and they're really not the majority. And so it is really it's really important that when you have an equity conversation, that it's brought down to the level to where you are ensuring that everyone who is at the table or who you desire to be, who you're trying to make this decision for, that you're being true to what the decision is, to make sure everyone can rise to the top. Because at any point to where if anybody feels that they cannot rise with the rest of the boat, then that's still not equity, and it's not equality. It will always be a one-sided conversation. So it has to be inclusive of everyone. The only way you're going to be able to get there, and the only way we'll be true to having a true equity conversation, it has to be everyone at the table, and it's not a one-sided conversation. It is an inclusive conversation that truly includes everyone.
And that's a fantastic, the comments blew up when we were talking about the distinction between equity and equality. And I think that's a really enlightening comment that we have to, equality means everyone equal, equity brings bringing people up to levels of equality. It's what I heard you saying there. And then that actually goes to Katrina. Katrina had a question about how we help manage that idea of inclusiveness. So her question specifically is, what should residents do when it's the elected officials themselves that are impeding a kind of inclusivity? I know that you, again, working in your bipartisanship work, you reach out to everyone and bring them in. What are some tactics or strategies you've used to help overcome some of those barriers to inclusivity?
Well, I mean, I think the problem that a lot of elected officials shy away from, if they shy away from the conversation, people elected you to be able to have tough conversations, one. And those tough conversations require you to show up for them and look residents directly in their face and tell them what your intentions are. We're no different. I mean, although we're grown-ups, we're no different than we are when we were children, when we want to be heard. If you ignore people, they speak louder. And they will continue to knock on the door. Then they're going to bam down the door until they're going to knock the door down until they're heard. And elected officials, they can subside all of that just by being extremely clear about one thing, and that it's the people who represented them. So that's from the elected official side. From the resident side is, no movement has ever happened without people actually rising to tell elected officials that we're the boss, you represent us, and we can remove you. And that's every election cycle. That's the true term limits that really exist. And so residents have to be clear on that you know what, If you don't want to listen to us, we'll rise up to make it known that you don't represent us well enough. And then the last thing is, I tell people all the time, if you believe that you can do this much better, then don't be afraid to say, you know what, I believe I can represent these people better, and I will run. But I will say this: if people who decide to run based off of them not being served, allow that to be your reasoning, that you don't feel that the community is being served. Not ego, not because you want power, not because of anything else, but you believe that the people deserve better.
That is such an awesome call to action. That our mini revolutions that happen every 2 and 4 years here in the United States allow for those transitions, and that's our role as citizens, is to oust those who don't represent us anymore and to rise up to do that together. So I have a question for you. So let's keep exploring this again, bipartisanship and reaching specifically in Florida. What would you say, again, for teachers who are trying to help their students understand the difficulties in Florida? What would you say the biggest challenges are that are not allowing the communities to come together? What would you say the biggest challenges in Florida are right now? And as a caveat to that, how can teachers help their students understand these issues?
First of all, the state of Florida don't respect the teachers like they should. So I'm gonna be extremely honest. I'm gonna say that first. Teachers deserve to be respected. And I've come out of the classroom, and the teachers are, we should not be in a position to where we are treating teachers in a way to where they feel so unappreciated, and where they feel as if their voices are not being heard. That's why so many teachers are leaving the classroom, because teachers feel that, you know what, there's no, why should I stay here? I love my students, I love my sanity more, and I love my peace more. And so, and that's the first issue. How can we merge the two worlds? We need to listen to the teachers more. And we need to allow them to be the decision makers on what's best for them. It annoys me so much, and I just have to say it, this annoys me so much, that legislators who have never have been in a room with 30 students, yet still you can sit on a dais and say what's best for teachers. And so many of us say, well, I spoke to teachers. No, but have you experienced the classroom before? Have you created a lesson plan before? Have you had to do these things? Have you dealt with a parent conference before? Have you dealt with trying to work with a parent on an IEP before? And so it's baffling to me that we can make the laws and not listen to the teachers. It's not right. It's wrong. And so the only way we're going to do that is put the practitioners in the driver's seat, allow them to help us create the policy.
Right. And so as I'm sure you know, there's a lot going on in the civics and history space in Florida right now, and how and what can and should be taught in history and civics classrooms. And so I was just, as someone who is on both sides and knows the difficulty of unfunded mandates and testing and and somehow not allowing or requiring certain concepts to be taught, what would you say the goals of history and civic education should be? As someone who sits in with both these hats on, someone who knows education and someone who knows legislation, where do you see the gaps? What are the goals of civics and history education? You know, some light conversation.
Tell the truth. Period. Tell the truth. When you lie, you have to keep lying, and it eventually be found out. Tell the truth. The history is history. It's history for a reason, and we've been there. We've come out of it, and it should be taught to students in age appropriate, because I'm an educator, so there is a side that I stand on to where it should be age appropriate. But we can't put teachers in a position to where now they're dancing around what they can't teach. Educational freedom is real, and you've been in the classroom, and you know that when you start boxing me in for what I can't and cannot say, now you're muzzling me. I understand the standards, right? and I understand this as the standards that are trying to get me to a particular goal to prepare students from assessment. But when your standards are geared towards trying to dance around what actually happened in our history, that's not right. Our history is that for a reason, and our children deserve to understand that. And the teachers have a responsibility also, correct, not to put their own spin on what history is, or not trying to make students feel ostracized or make anyone feel any less than who they are. But it should be a lesson of inclusivity. It should be a lesson of understanding that, I mean, this is our ugly past, but this is who we are. This is what we can be. This is where we're going. That's what the conversation should have. Now, and I'll end with this, that when elected officials and politicians start getting into this culture war, what we're dealing with right now, it's dangerous. It is very dangerous for us to do that, especially when we start altering and trying to mess with history.
So that what I hear you saying is that when the legislators are trying to dictate any particular path,
yeah,
it's a very dangerous place for American education.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
And so Florida is a very, very diverse place. It has so many different communities, and those communities often have tensions, but they also often come together in really, really beautiful ways to support each other. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to this understanding? So I'm thinking about, like, you must have had your own teachers or your parents who really helped you understand how to have these conversations, or how to come to this. Can you tell us a little bit about that story if you want to? You don't have to.
Absolutely. So my parents were very big on my brothers and I reading. So we would ask questions, but my dad would never give us the answer. My dad would always say, "Go read about it." I will never forget. Every month we got a shipment of encyclopedias, and we had a full library in our dining room area with books, Dr. Seuss books, Goosebumps.
I don't know your dad, but I love your dad.
We had it all. Saturdays was before we got on the video game, we went to feed the homeless, and then we got home, we had reading time, and then we had our time for video games. So my parents were big on reading, and so therefore, I utilize that now. In a lot of the things that I do, and doing a lot of research and doing a lot of reading on things to put a different perspective to a lot of things. Because if you're not careful, a lot of times you can come off speaking in talking points and not and people notice when you're speaking in talking points, which is not fair to the process. It's much better to be able to speak from a place of factuality and actuality, to know that what you're talking about. So my parents played a huge role in this entire scheme of where I'm at right now, and which I hope that I will continue to share with other young people and people, period, and disseminating information so people can have a clear understanding of what this process means, what civics education means, what is history, what is happening within this process, so people can have a clear guidance on how to make a decision and make their comments that they're making is based off facts.
So read and read some more.
Read some more.
I love it. I went to a great book school, so I have an eye on it there. If you could see my office or my home office, it's very, very full, where our daughter already has 2 full bookshelves. She's less than a year old. I understand. Yeah. So again, thinking about your own kind of story and narrative journey into the public life, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your coming out and to the public eye, and what advice you might have for young LGBT people, especially those considering public service.
I like that question. Tell me where you want me to start. Let me ask
you make that choice. We have time. You tell the story you want to tell.
I appreciate that. So I when I got into office, I was not open with my sexuality because I thought that was a determining factor. I wasn't open at all. I was married and everything else because I was raised in a very Christian household, very conservative, and my parents, yeah, they raised a very honest son, and I knew that me getting into office and fighting for a lot of these issues, I wasn't required to do anything but continue to show up as my full self. But I wasn't showing up as my full self daily, right? I was showing up. Half of who I was and not telling the truth. And so I remember when I finally got the call from the Miami Herald to talk about this truth, I didn't know what I wanted to do because they were going to tell the story regardless. And so what I didn't want to do, Rachel, I didn't want anyone telling my story for me. So I said I wanted to tell my own story. Let me create the narrative around all of this. So I spoke about who I was and came out, and I was extremely, extremely nervous because I said some people supported it, some people spoke behind my back, some people still talk behind your back, which doesn't matter. But some people didn't support it, and they made it clear that you'll never get elected again. And yeah, that haunted me for a long time because I knew I wanted to go higher in office. I knew that I wanted to continue doing the work, but I just did not know the direction and the path that I would take. But I said to myself, there is somebody out there who's probably battling who they are, and they're just looking for someone to say, here's my example, here's my benchmark. And so I said, why not? Why not just be honest and do it? And I did it. And I don't regret it for 2 seconds. Even when I ran for the state Senate, my opponents used it against me. They tried to use it against me, but it actually benefited me because when I went to door, Rachel, nobody asked me about my sexuality. Nobody asked me who my partner was. That wasn't important to them. You know what they asked? It was during COVID. And so they asked about their unemployment. They asked about their health care. They asked about their child education. They asked about what are we going to do in the state of Florida to combat this. That's what they asked. And so anybody who is trying to figure out, whether or not whatever their closet might be, it's going to have to be the LGBTQ. It's going to have to be that you're gay. But whatever that issue might be, trust me, living your truth will make you sleep well at night. Trust me. And the people will select you every time. When I say you, I'm talking about your full self. I show up as my full self every day and I sleep well at night. And whoever don't like it, it's not my problem, it's theirs. Because I've come to the conclusion that when you become okay with it, you give everyone else permission to be okay with it also.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that's such a testimony to, again, your strength and your conviction. And that's what makes you a good legislator. And if I may humbly say so, a good person. And so I'm so excited about this conversation. It sounds like we've covered a lot of ground. I'm wondering if there's anything you came into this conversation that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on yet. I still have a couple of questions, but I wanted to give you space to say, oh, I was going to talk to the Bill of Rights Institute and I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in talking about, I think our country is in a very, we're in a reckoning with ourselves right now, right? And I'm interested in a conversation on, how do we move away from identity politics, everyone being on separate sides, and we get to where people are, because this is where people are. People are sick of the left, the right, and all this other stuff. And people are truly trying to figure out how do we get back on track? And I think we're just having a hard time doing that. And I genuinely am looking at ways to not just win people over, because if there's some commonality that all of us have, everyone wants to be healthy. Everyone wants to make sure their family is provided for. I mean, those are the commonalities that we have. But it seems as we're missing something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I see what you're seeing, and that's why we're having these civic conversations, and that why BRI is focusing on the things we're focusing on for the past few years. And I wonder if it's like if it's just a phase shift. Like representation is important.
Yep.
Representation is important, not so that it shows our differences, but that it shows our commonalities.
Yep.
And so that you can see yourself in the story of the other.
Yes.
And I think often when people, when some people do are very, that representation is very important to them, it's to showcase the otherness instead of showcasing the unity.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's just a lot of that like so much of identity is so important, but understanding your identity, as you said, it should bring us together, not separate us. It should show us that there's something human in common. Yeah. Not that we're all these isolated molecules that just have all this space between us, but that we actually are physical things. I don't want to think about that too much. You taught chemistry. It blows my mind. All this space, I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't want to think about it too hard, but that it's actually, we're physical objects like a chair. We're not just like molecules that never touch one another.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I was watching something on Disney Plus. It was talking about life and how we all were created. And the narrator said something at the beginning, and he said that if we only realize that we all start off the same way, that we will look at this very differently. And as simple as that might sound, it is so real that we really are, we're all the same. But we can't, it seems like there's a disconnect in all of this as a learned behavior. Once we get older and you start seeing this world, the world shows you something, and then we veer off.
So let's finish there. What's bringing you hope and joy right now? There's so much. You're someone who is elbow deep in some of the hardest conversations. You see the worst of people. What's bringing you hope and joy? Let's end there, Senator Shevrin Jones.
I would say here's what I'm saying. I would say the one thing that is bringing me hope is that there is a generation that is coming behind us that is not taking no for an answer. And I mean it. These young people are very clear about the world that they want to live in. And if we would just allow them to be free in what they believe this world can be, I think that's where my hope lies in. And it's a safe space. If we trust these young people, they will help us win. And I mean that. I look at it from my nephews. I look at it from young people when I go speak to them. And history is watching us, Rachel. And history can be a cruel judge. And if not careful, we'll look back and have to ask ourselves, what did we do to contribute to the history that's being made, right? And I think what you and I are doing right now, we'll look back on this 30, 40 years from now, and we'll say we had this conversation. And the young people did help us. They were the ones to help us win. And so that's where my hope lies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so grateful that you gave us this time in your exceedingly busy life, and that we could come together to have this conversation. I truly hope it's the first of many. It has been an absolute delight chatting with you. Yes. Did you have any final thoughts or comments or anything you wanted to say to the people who are watching this live? There are about 20 of them, or people who will watch this on YouTube in the future.
I would just ask them, what are you going to do with what's in your hand?
That's a really great call to action. We have a lot of comments saying we're doing it, we're trying. So this is your Senator, Florida teachers. So reach out to him and his offices. You can find him on his website. Is there a particular place you'd like people to look for you, Senator Jones?
Yeah, I'm always on Twitter. You can follow me at Shevrin Jones on Twitter, on Instagram at Shevrin Jones. You can follow me on Facebook at Shevrin Jones. and I'm always there.
And it was an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. I'm so grateful for the work you're doing, and for the energy and authenticity you come to it with. So thank you to all our participants and to you, Senator Jones. And this was a civic conversation by the Bill of Rights Institute. I'm Rachel Davison-Humphreys, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our programs across Florida. We are coming to Florida. I'm going to be in Florida for 2 weeks at the end of July, going to basically every city. And we're going to be in Florida 18 times next year. So we will be in your town, very likely. So sign up at billofrightsinstitute.org and we'll send you information about where we're hosting our events. And you can reach out to us, reach out to Senator Jones, and keep doing the amazing work that you're doing to support your students as citizens for the future. Citizenship is hard work. BRI is here to help. And we are so grateful for the work you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.